Good day. This is Side 384, Study Session 6, Research Designs. Introduction. A research design is a structure or plan which will guide a researcher during the process of data collection and analysis and ensures that the eventual outcome of the study is reliable. Festinger, 1964, believed that research designs enable the researcher to answer research questions as validly, objectively, accurately, and economically as possible. In any study, the research design is likened to a master plan which specifies the methods and procedures for collecting and analyzing the needed information. Zygmunt, 1994. Objectives. At the end of this lecture, you should be able to 1. Explain the different types of research designs used in behavioral science research, and 2. Describe the characteristics of each design. Pre-test. Mention and describe the different types of research design used in behavioral science research. Content. One-group design. In the one-group research design, the main focus of the researcher is to observe what happens to the dependent variable, DV, when the independent variable, IV, is manipulated. For example, a researcher might want to know the influence of public enlightenment slogan on HIV on sexual practice among youths. If after a period, a group of respondents who were exposed to the slogan say they now practice safe sex, we cannot say for sure whether it is the slogan that brought about this change in them or not. This is because other variables, known as extraneous variables, were not controlled and they could be responsible for the change observed in the respondents. Thus, one drawback with this type of design lies in its lack of control over extraneous variables. The implication is that the researcher cannot conclude that the observed changes are due solely to the treatment administered. Before and after one-group design. With this type of research design, the researcher will observe and note the value of the dependent variables before the experimental treatment is given, and again after the treatment has been administered on the participants. This research design has two types. The first type has what is known as a comparison group or a control group. The control group does not receive any treatment, whose purpose is to enable the researcher determine the influence of the treatment on the experimental group. Suppose we want to study the influence of TV generosity on generosity behavior among teenagers. Two groups of teenagers are formed, with one group serving as a comparison group because it will not be exposed to TV generosity, while the other group which receives treatment is the experimental group exposed to TV generosity. Consequently, scores on generosity are taken twice, that is, before and after the treatment has been administered on the experimental group. The difference in scores of generosity observed, if any, is attributed to the influence of TV generosity. The other type is a situation where treatment is given to the same group, but at different times. We can call this repeated measure. For instance, the same group of teenagers is exposed to TV generosity, but at different times. Any difference in observed generosity scores at the two different periods may not be solely linked to the influence of the treatment, since there are other plausible explanations for the observed changes in generosity behavior. One advantage of this type of design is that it enables the researcher to confirm the presence or absence of changes in the dependent variable as a result of manipulation of the independent variable. Two-group design. The two-group research design involves two independent groups of participants, with one group A exposed to the treatment while the other group B receives no treatment. Thereafter, the researcher compares both groups on the measure of interest for the influence of the treatment. For instance, two groups of children may be compared on aggression, but only one group will be exposed to TV aggression, while the other group will not receive any such exposure, that is treatment. It is important to note that all of these research designs treated so far share one thing in common, and that is lack of control of extraneous variables. This constitutes a major limitation when using these designs and negatively affect the validity and reliability of findings of studies in which these designs are used. However, it is noteworthy that there are certain studies for which these designs are best suited for. Correlational design. This design is used when the interest of the researcher is to establish that a relationship exists between two or more variables. It is a non-experimental design because there is no manipulation of variables involved. If a researcher suspects that there is a relationship between parents' level of formal education and child's academic performance, the researcher will take scores on parents' education and scores on children's academic performance and compare the two scores. The coefficient we get will indicate the degree and direction of the relationship between both variables, whether it is positive or negative correlation. The typical approach then, when using the correlational method, is to measure two or more characteristics of each member of a group of people and then to determine the relationship between the scores on one variable and the scores on other variables. Factorial designs. Factorial designs are designs with multiple independent variables. Each independent variable is a factor in a factorial design. By convention, a factorial design is described in terms of the number of conditions or levels of each independent variable. A 2 times 2 design, for example, has two independent variables at two levels or treatment conditions. A 2 times 3 design has two independent variables with one at two levels and the other at three levels. In the same vein, a 3 times 2 times 2 design has three independent variables with the first having three conditions while the other have two levels or conditions respectively. Factorial designs provide two types of information about the effect of the independent variables. A main effect is the effect that one independent variable has in isolation of the effect of other independent variables. That is, a main effect represents what will have happened supposing the experiment was conducted using that single variable and ignoring the effect of the other independent variables. An interaction effect, on the other hand, occurs when two or more independent variables combine to produce an effect over and above their main effects. Interactions can be observed only when the effect of two or more independent variables are considered simultaneously. For this reason, interaction effect can be found only when a factorial design is used. Let us consider examples where we have main effect and interaction effect in a study. In a study to examine the effect of sex differences and age on hostility, the main effect are the independent effect of age and sex on hostility, while the interactions effect are the joint or combined effect of age and sex taken together on hostility. The number of possible outcomes in a factorial design is a function of the number of independent variables and the levels or treatment conditions involved. For instance, in a 2 times 2 design, that is of sex differences and age on hostility, there are 8 possible outcomes. There may or may not be an effect for each of the two independent variables, and the independent variables may not interact. Where MO is equal to male, old, FO equals to female, hold, MY equals to male, young, FY equals to female, young. In the diagram above, besides the main effect of age and sex on hostility, a total possible outcomes of 4: male or hostility, female or hostility, young or hostility, hold or hostility. The interaction effect will give us the picture above. Uses of factorial design. 1. Factorial designs can be used to test hypotheses about moderator variables. 2. To detect other effects in counterbalanced within subject designs. And 3. To control for extraneous variance through blocking. Summary. In this lecture, we examine the different types of research designs used in behavioral science research and the characteristics of each design. We have come to the end of study session 6. Thanks for listening.